I almost cannot imagine a scenario where his supporters will peel away no matter what he does in that debate. Like, he could literally fall over and throw up in like a garbage can, and people would be like, wow, that's great. Look how strong he was. He was feeling sick and he still showed up because he's a real American leader and all this kind of thing. Do you feel like the Trump base is that locked in, or do you think actually if he has a really tough debate performance, it actually could hurt him as much as it would hurt Biden?
It really is going to come down to the independent vote, is how I see it. And I do think that, if you look at Biden, you look at Trump, they're about equal when it comes to saying outrageous things. Trump's better at marketing it in his favor. Biden, it tends to hurt him. For whatever reason, I don't know exactly why. Ultimately, the message is going to be about how do American people see themselves moving forward in relation to crises, like coronavirus or the economy, and do we have a strong leader? And how are we going to articulate ourselves on the world stage? And I think that if Biden can present a fresh sort of approach that puts himself as a strong leader, a competent leader, and less about Trump and how horrible he is, then I think that he'll probably just have a pretty easy way through, regardless of how he'll do in the debates. Trump, I don't think it's going to matter. He's unpredictable. He can say anything. He still shines. He's sort of Teflon John. So I don't really think the opposite. Yeah.
Do you think the opposite is true? That I think we both seem to agree that if Trump has a terrible, embarrassing performance, his base will not have any change at all. What if Trump somehow surprised us and, showed great empathy and showed like mastery of facts and data and information, and was able to put together really logical, well-formed arguments? Do you think those independents would similarly kind of go towards Trump? Do you think that he could actually debate his way into a victory?
Yes, I do. I think that a lot of American people, unlike you and I, that's on Twitter, we got our YouTube channels, and people that follow us, we follow other people, we're really engaged in politics. But the average American really is not. They just sort of look at headlines. They occasionally go on Twitter. They occasionally watch video here and there. And I think it's really going to be a matter of what happens in October, really, in the debates. And if Trump can come across as genuine, as caring, persuade American about his numbers, especially with India's numbers going up and other nations that surpass the U.S. And you say, hey, look here, we're not as bad as, media trying to paint it. I think he could still squeak by.
Interesting. Where do you think, are you looking at any states in particular, or are you more focused on the kind of ideological spectrum? Any thoughts on the geography of the race?
I'm looking at the West Coast. I think that he's going for something unpredictable. I'm looking at Pennsylvania. I'm looking at Oregon, Nevada, possibly Minnesota. Those are some areas that he really is trying to eat away at the base to surprise people. So I would not be surprised if we woke up and one of those states went over to Trump, perhaps Wisconsin, perhaps Minnesota even. Oregon, I think, would be more difficult, although I think he's chipping away at the numbers there. Florida might surprise us. He might still be able to pull that off, especially with all of the fanfare with the boats and trying to get it, people get into the Guinness Book of World Records for the number of boats, behind Trump. So he's really good at fanfare. He's really good at media. Yeah. He's really good at drawing people in. He's good at excitement, and Americans love that. Americans eat that up. Bigger the better. Texas style. Whether we try to deny it or not, it's sort of in our DNA, and Trump represents that. He embodies that.
Let's take a look at what the gamblers are thinking here. Here's a map of the betting odds, And as you mentioned, Florida is one of those sort of 55 or I guess 56, 54, 46 kind of bit of a toss up. Look at Arizona. Arizona, Trump, I think, carried Arizona last time. And then you've got North Carolina freaking 50-50. That's exciting.
But I think part of the context for me would be looking back at 2016, and at this time, they had similar numbers for Clinton, something like 70% in her favor to 20-something% in favor of Trump winning. And of course,
the probability, yeah, it was exactly the same. Yeah,
but you are right to look at this, state by state. I think that's, there's a little bit of difference there. However, I will.
Yeah, I mean the fact that there's any like heartbeat of activity in Texas for Democrats and is just like stunning. It's you look at where Trump's support is these days, and it's basically, if you were to look at the map, it would seem like the dark red is, effectively the parts of the country that have pretty much been left behind in kind of the last 20 years of economic growth that we've had. And so you can understand the frustration, and it makes you then wonder, like, man, Yang would have been a great message, because I don't think you can tell that sort of center and southeast part of the country, like, oh, don't worry, we're going to go back to the good old days and everything's going to be fine. Because I think they know that was the Hillary message. Like, no, everything is not fine. Right. And I haven't heard Biden or Harris really to speak to that audience and acknowledge that things are not okay and we're going to try and do something about it. They seem to be more like, look, let's just at least un-Trump ourselves, but not much more at the moment. Do you think they need to speak more to these sort of truly economically harmed voters that maybe they felt like they had no choice but go with Trump?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do think it ultimately hurts them, not only in, I think, there's such a problem when we think about centrist Democrats, not only from the standpoint of the mainstream media, because they tend to highlight sensation and they focus a lot on Donald Trump, and they focus a lot on, I don't know, just things that generally don't have to do with economics. And in social media, Biden's also hurt because, it's everything about the DNC and how everything's wrong and nothing is right. And so there is that sort of a vacuum, that there's no Biden. There's nothing positive. But if you look at his policies, he really is one of the most progressive candidates we've had, I would say, since FDR. I know that sounds ridiculous, but if you really look at his policies, now it's a question of whether he's going to follow through or not. Now, I'm talking about a nominee, of course, but obviously someone like Yang or Bernie would have been more progressive. But in terms of a nominee, he's very progressive, and I think it would benefit him to discuss those. People often confuse being left and progressive as meaning the same thing, and they're not. And I think that working class people, why they are jumping on to Yang is because they like his UBI. It's a progressive policy.
Yeah, I noticed you did some videos, and I did a couple on Biden policy. I was pleasantly surprised. I think I had this assumption that, he's just going to basically say the same crap say the same stuff that Hillary was saying, kind of this incremental, just, poke around the edges. But you look at what he's talking about, climate, you look at what he's talking about, certainly with the COVID response, with, Medicare for all who want it kind of movement. That's pretty freaking progressive to me. Do you think, I'm guessing there was broad input on those policy positions on the website? I think you touched on the notion of like, well, will he actually follow through? What do you think? Like, do you think he'll actually go that far? Because that seems like a little bit of step to the left for where he used to be.
Yeah, I don't think it's really going to matter because I think that if he does not follow through, we're in a different time, in a different space in 2016, 2015. I think that's where a lot of people get caught up in not wanting to vote Biden, as they think it's going to end up with the same outcome. I think we're seeing a different, a different context. But I think that if he doesn't follow through, someone like Kamala Harris is ultimately going to end up being the one that will hurt from that if she decides to run in 2024. And Yang Gang, Bernie camp, the Tulsi camp, even some Trumpers that might consider Biden because they like Yang and they're sort of riding on his coattails. I think they're going to want to look to Biden, or they're wanting something that is more stable and brings America back, brings its economy back. So if Biden doesn't follow through, I think he's ultimately going to hurt himself, and it's going to benefit us because that's going to increase the odds that we're going to lean into a progressive candidate in 2024. On the other hand, if he does follow through, then that I think will end up helping Kamala, presuming Biden doesn't do more than one term.
Right. And do you think are you in the camp that Kamala is sort of the presumed nominee for 2024? What's your take on that?
Well, yeah, I'd like to sort of change the dialogue on that, because I feel that part of the problem that people, progressives, or even well-minded conservatives have when they think about how political change happens, it's not really about who has the power. It's really about who comes out to vote. And unfortunately, the youth generally don't vote. Like if we look at this last primary, we had some great selections, and some great, Yang, we had Bernie, so forth and so on. I mean, the numbers were there if we had come out, but it was like 27% that were in X, Y, and Z, and something like 50, 60% that was boomers and older.
Yeah.
So it really is about captivating an audience. And I mean, you can see how Trump was elected with 25% of the voting population. So it really is about who activates and who makes it important, who prioritizes, who gets out, and who votes. That is really going to determine who. I don't think Kamala is, a promise in. Let's put it that way. I think we're in a different space. I think that people are more awake, more aware. They're going to pay attention. They're going to expect. They're going to, the rooster's going to come home to roost, as they say, if Biden doesn't follow through.
Yeah. I was quite surprised at the Iowa primary or Iowa caucus turnout by young people. I mean, you had Bernie and you had Yang with some of the best youth support around, and dudes did not and gals did not turn out. It's like, the hell's going on? Like, where they were. I mean, obviously on Twitter,
question.
Right? Twitter, YouTube, it was crazy. And then you look at the caucuses in Iowa, and you're like, where the hell is everybody? Where's the Yang Gang? What do you think happened there?
I think it's sort of like putting the cart before the horse. I think a lot of people that is inexperienced in politics often will say, like, give me something to vote for, and then I'll come out to vote. They don't recognize that voting is what makes change happen. Not waiting for mommy or daddy, whether it be the Republican Party or Democratic establishment, giving you what you want because you're yelling or you're saying, I'm going to withhold my vote. That doesn't ultimately, I think, in the grand scheme, it doesn't have as much weight than if you actually show up to vote and you actually activate and you get out the growing vote and things like that. That ultimately is what wins the day.
Yeah, what I think the numbers that I saw were that there were more Iowa caucus voters this time around than in 2016, but far less than 2012 and 2008. And I don't know. I don't want to beat up on our fellow Yang Gangers that are in the millennial category, but you know, like I voted from Switzerland. You know, I made sure that and even that was after he suspended.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's like cynicism, you know, it breeds defeat is sort of the way I think of it. And I think a lot of times, you know, whether it be Yang supporters or Bernie supporters, you know, they see politics not happening at the pace they want. They see, you know, Biden isn't saying the right things, Bernie's not saying the right things, or Yang didn't say this exactly the right way. And they sort of get into that perfectionistic trap and they say, well, heck, I'm not going to vote. So what's the point? You know, like he didn't say exactly what I wanted, or she didn't say exactly what I wanted. So they just sort of give up, you know. And I think that that is ultimately what is the thing that's leading to things not happening and things going in the opposite direction of what we say we want, because then you're essentially inadvertently giving your power over to the opposition, that, you know, sort of the complete opposite to what you say is important to you.
Gang gang 2020. Gang gang 2020. Gang gang 2020. Gang gang. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah, yeah. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah. I want 1,000 a month, 1,000 a month. I want 1,000 a month, 1,000 a month. Let's get this bread. Freedom dividend. Are all y'all paying attention? Automation gonna sweep the nation unless we get him in. Andrew Yang 2020 freedom dividend. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah, yeah. First we get this money, then on 420 he gonna give some high fives to some high guys. Decriminalize marijuana so we can smoke if we wanna. Down with the opioid trend, up with the mental health thing. Yeah, math, yo, it's just math. Yo, it's simple math. Yo, can you do math? Yo, eliminate super PACs, color stars making stacks, student loan forgiveness plan.